Chapter 30. In a few years, information about the development of abilities will be known to the world. They too will come to realize the potential of the power they possess. Being in the military would have been an even better environment for further development. Perhaps it wouldn't hurt to drop a few hints early and win their favor. There was a person who had managed to advance a power related to attributes which was notoriously difficult to develop to several levels and reach the top. There was a saying that no one understood the mechanism of the abilities possessed by the Awakeners better than Yudrian Ale, the commander of the cavalry. The potential for future development, which even the Awakeners themselves had not yet realized, appeared as clear to Yudhir's eyes as reading the branches of a handprint. He quickly came to a conclusion and opened his mouth. In my opinion, it's a very impressive ability, but you seem to underestimate your power. Underestimate? Didn't you just see it? It's a flame that can't even singe a single hair of a monster. What's so impressive about it? Aemon laughed as if he heard a funny joke, waving the pipe emitting smoke in his hand. Gidder, without a hint of a smile, opened his mouth again. You might feel that way if you're trying to singe a monster's hair, but what if you sparked your flame in the monster's eye or mouth during a fight? Aemon's pipe, which had been lightly shaking, stopped. The casual smile on Sun's face also disappeared in an instant. Your flame is like a spark from a flint, short and bustling powerfully. It's not like a big fire that you have to worry about maintaining. You can just keep trying as needed. Yudhir looked straight at them as he continued. If you get used to summoning the flame more quickly, more frequently, like striking a flint repeatedly, you could potentially ignite dozens, if not hundreds, of places simultaneously. Do you still feel your power is insignificant? I have never thought about it that way, Aemon stammered, his face aghast. Try it if you haven't. That much will undoubtedly be possible soon. And Suns, oh yes, Suns, who has been watching the lesson Yudhir was given Aemon, instinctively responded with military precision. It was as if he was in the presence of a superior, but none of the three found anything odd about it. The ability to locate enemies in the darkness is an impressive reconnaissance skill. Regularly practice feeling beyond what you see with your eyes closed. As your senses become sharper, your ability will gradually develop. You might be able to extend the range of your vision or even selectively see only what you want to see. Close my eyes and practice. If you don't understand what I mean, try closing your eyes now. Yudhir's words carried the persuasive power forged from long years of serving as a commander. For some reason, Suns felt as though he was obeying an order and unwittingly closed his eyes. Do you see anything? No, not now, nothing at all. When you use your ability, do you have to concentrate hard? Yes. How did you? It was obvious. Even an ordinary person without any vision ability would need to concentrate to look closely at something. Much more so for someone whose ability was precisely that. Yudhir had seen many like them before. You should start practicing the ability to focus instantly when necessary. Anyway, I'm going to hold up a few fingers in front of your face. Try to concentrate and guess how many there are. Eh? Just like that? Out of the blue? I am doing it now. How many do you feel? Wait, just give me a moment. Yudhir didn't give Suns a moment to think. He immediately held up 3 fingers in front of his face. Suns began to fuss, pressing his lips tightly together and furrowing his brow. A very faint ripple of energy emanated from around him. Try to guess before I count down from 5. 5, 4, 3. Wait a moment, I'm still 2, 1, how many? 2, no, 3. Sins mumbled in a resigned tone. However, he was correct. Yudhir chuckled, seeing Amon's wide-eyed expression from the corner of his eye. Open your eyes. What? Sins opened his eyes to see 3 fingers right in front of him, and his face turned pale. You guessed correctly. But it was so sudden. Maybe it was just luck. No, you were correct, Yudhir asserted with conviction. Doubting yourself only makes it harder to fully utilize your abilities. Have confidence. But still, both of you might think that what I'm saying sounds odd, but I have been observing people with these abilities for a while now, and I'm still doing so. Believe what I say. Upon hearing Yudhir's words, both men looked at each other with peculiar expressions. They seemed unsure about how to interpret this strange conversation that had abruptly taken place. Of course, they would be surprised and confused, but I need to change their perception of their abilities too. Yudhir looked at both of them and began to speak. Your abilities are far from useless. I can bet anything that important people will soon come find your abilities necessary. Important people? Who are they? No one has sought out us in 2 years, Amon muttered as he tapped the ash from his pipe. We are just ordinary soldiers. There must be countless people with abilities like ours throughout the Our Empire, right? Like that, what was it? The cavalry that the Emperor just recruited? You are well informed. Why do you think the cavalry was recruited? Because they were needed. They may have been overlooked for 2 years, but in other words, it was only 2 years. The past 2 years, a time when there was no cavalry, was a period when people were on edge and struggled to adapt to the emergence of individuals with new abilities. And now that the adaptation was over, a new world was about to unfold. A world that, for now, only Yudhir knew about. The world doesn't yet understand the value of these powers, but they will soon change. When the moment comes that many people realize their worth, it will inevitably change. Do you really believe that? Sins tilted his head and asked. He still seemed skeptical. Responding with an immediate affirmation might make me seem like a demagogue, so Yudhir just smiled quietly. If you are unaware of the power you possess, you won't be able to properly use it when it's needed the most. Know your strength well until someone who needs it appears, and don't belittle its worth. If you trivialize your own power, others will regard it as even more insignificant. At Yudhir's words, both Sins and Amon fell into deep thought simultaneously. As soldiers, they were taught that it was a virtue to obediently follow orders from above and to unconditionally obey their generals and emperor. This concept might have been difficult for them to understand immediately. However, they needed to grasp this in order to shake off the deeply ingrained military spirit and change the situation when the special forces are eventually formed. Well, you might be right. If I belittle my strength, others will find it even more laughable. I didn't think about that part because it was always that way with the guys here from the start. Amon looking at his extinguished pipe, lifted one corner of his lips. If we improve the way we use our power through the training, as you suggest, our situation, which hasn't shown any signs of promotion for years, might get better. In the Our Empire, the military was perceived as nothing more than a group under the knights who possessed enormous powers, merely filling up the numbers. After humans were able to use mana and aura, wars were always about those who could wield such powers. There was a time in the ancient past when tactics and individual soldiers' skills mattered, but no one thought of that anymore. It had been long since winning was about whether a sword master or a great mage was on their side. In the end, the main tasks of the Ur Empire's imperial army could not be exaggerated as merely defending the borders, maintaining public order, and dealing with troublesome monsters. Even though the high-ranking officers who commanded the military were of both noble birth, they did not regard their positions as one of real power. Only the generals who commanded the southern and the northern armies in turn held their positions as sword masters, using them as stepping stones to enhance their honor and grasp higher power. Like General Gino Bordelli, the rare case of maintaining the general's position for a long time was only possible when one had outstanding skills and a clean and uncorruptible disposition without any ambition for promotion. Despite this, the reason why commoners kept joining the military was simple. They could earn a stable income without suffering from a lord's exploitation, and it was one of the few opportunities for commoners to travel around leaving their hometowns. Those who applied for the military were usually children pushed out from poor commoner families to reduce the number of mouths to feed. Being able to join the military was a slightly better situation. Those who couldn't often end up in mercenary bands or did menial jobs at the local echelons of the market until they died. Occasionally, even though they were commoners, if they had shown an extraordinary talent for martial arts during training, they could rise to a fairly high rank. However, such events were so rare throughout the 1,000-year history of the empire that they could be counted on one hand. Ydir guessed that the cause of this lethargic attitude and self-deprecating behavior of the soldiers who had been idling in the mountains for the 2 years was probably due to this. Chapter 31. One of the main reasons Ydir had initially paid little mind to the news that a special forces unit was being formed was because he knew the military's morale significantly deteriorated. The soldiers in front of him lacked confidence in their strength and couldn't imagine a future better than their current circumstances. How could such people have possibly come together to form a special unit? Could it have been that someone with power secretly helped them establish it by offering a sweet reward? Perhaps someone like the Emperor, who had promised glory to the special forces while driving Ydir towards death. Ydir opened his mouth, looking into their eyes. This power can certainly be an enormous opportunity. Be sure to understand its value properly so you can grasp the opportunity when it comes. And if you need help with this matter, feel free to seek me out at any time. You seem to know more about this power than we do, but how are we to know who to look for? Emon asked with a hesitant expression. Instead of replying, Ydir picked up a metal fork that was lying on the table. A moment later, a thin stream of water swirled above the fork, forming a beautiful spiral. Upon witnessing this, Emon and Sun's eyes widened in astonishment. "I'm Ydir of the cavalry." Ydir purposefully didn't mention his rank. It was likely to win him more favor from them. "I have only been in the cavalry for a few months myself. I am not much different from you all. However, I believe in the future that this power can bring about. I hope that you too will come to understand its true value." That was all. There were no ulterior motives. By stating this upfront, he preemptively eliminated any potential for misinterpretation. Ydir stood up, looking at Sun and Emon, who had stunned expressions. He had seen all he needed to see. It was time to leave. Thank you for showing me around the village, Sons. I'll be on my way now. Yudhir turned his back before Sons could speak. Young soldiers were laughing raucously, completely oblivious to what had transpired at the corner table. Even after he had left, the two men behind him sat in silence for a long time, unable to utter a word. The next day, the cavalry, together with the Knights of Paletta, all left their lodgings at dawn. Kishir was waiting for them in front of the base they had seen last night, alongside General Gino. I'm not sure if you all managed to get a good rest last night. Despite the fact that he had said he was going to drink with General Gino, Kishir looked completely unwary. As I mentioned yesterday, we will start retrieving the redstone from today. For today, we will identify the location of the stone and assess the extent to which we can approach it and gather information. Yesterday, General Gino had said that a strange energy was emanating from the redstone, making it difficult for ordinary people to even approach it. However, people who are skilled enough to use aura, particularly General Gino, could approach it quite closely. The cavalry could not predict how they would perceive this. If during the journey anyone feels it's too difficult to approach due to the strange phenomena caused by the stone, they should stop walking and report to me before starting their descent. There is no shame in descending. That too will be helpful in gathering information. Well, with General Gino, the Swordmaster, by our side, we wouldn't need to worry about the nuisances. Yudhir reinterpreted Kishir's words from his own perspective. Kishir's rhetorical skills, able to sugarcoat any message, were still amazing. If Yudhir had been in that position, he would have bluntly told the nuisances to immediately descend and stay out of the way. If they get into trouble while descending, or after they have descended, I would have threatened them, saying I won't let them off easy. Now, let's move. Despite many people's concerns, Kishir said he would lead the way. He said that he would keep General Gino right behind him, but the Paletta Knights, who had the duty to protect him, showed clear signs of anxiety. Yudhir, knowing Kishir's ability, was not very worried. Rather, I should find the right moment to say I want to talk, but I wonder when that would be. Kishir moved forward without hesitation, as if he knew the path ahead. His steps were light, like those of a man out for a stroll. If it weren't for the divine sword hanging at its sword, one might truly believe it. Not long after they began walking, the traces of human footsteps gradually disappeared. The birds that had been chirping from the trees also became invisible, leaving only the dense forest and the occasional sounds of the wind. So far, I don't feel anything unusual. Yudhir was keenly observing the aura surrounding them as he moved. The steep uphill began, but the cavalry, who had undergone rigorous training, ascended the mountain without showing any signs of fatigue. Yudhir felt as if he was returning home, which was quite invigorating. After all, having grown up in the same mountain range, it was not an exaggeration to say that I have returned home. The clear and majestic energy of the Ariak mountain range, which he hadn't walked in a long time, seemed to welcome Yudhir. To the Yudhir of 11 years ago, it would have been a few months since he last visited. But the current Yudhir, who had lived and died without setting foot in his hometown for a very long time, was experiencing this feeling after a long time. Before joining the cavalry, he would wander these mountains alone, chopping wood and digging up medicinal herbs. He spent his days endlessly repeating the cycle of wandering all day and returning home to rest before sunset. He never felt lonely living alone, probably. Others asked how he could live alone in a mountain teeming with monsters and wild beasts. But Yudhir never found the mountain scary. It must have been his natural disposition. Even though he was much more naive than he is now, the essence of Yudhir back then wasn't much different from the present. A creepy human who only knows himself, ignorant of emotions. Yudhir recalled the words others used to describe him during his youth. Would those who couldn't even meet his gaze out of fear back then say the same about the current cavalry and Yudhir? There's a spring over there. We'll take a short break. About 2 hours into their silent trek up the mountain trail, Kishore gestured towards a spot and declared it was time for a rest. As he had indicated, there was a spring up ahead, seemingly man-made. A man-made spring with no signs of recent human activity. It was evidence that up until 2 years ago, before the Redstone fell, humans had relatively free access to this area. The party members each found a rock and a tree stump to sit on and rest. Some approached the spring to drink water. Yudhir watched Kana chatting with the elder siblings, thinking that Kana and Hen had become quite close since they had shared the same accommodation the night before. Kishore was discussing something with General Gino, a map that they had taken out from their belongings in hand. Would there be an opportunity for a personal conversation with him until they retrieved the Redstone and returned? If no such opportunity arose, Yudhir wondered if he might just have to approach him directly. Yudhir? Just then, Gakane sat next to Yudhir. Despite the fast-paced climb up the mountain, Gakane looked perfectly fine, without a single drop of sweat on him. Feeling anything yet? No. Me neither. Seems like everyone is fine so far. Could the Redstone really be up there? Gakane murmured, looking up at the sky. It was a cloudless, clear day. Where did you live? Is it far from here? It would probably take a few days to get there. That's quite far. It would have been nice to drop by if it was closer after we finish our business. Yudhir studied Gakane's regretful face, trying to understand his intention. Was it just an extension of him inviting Yudhir to visit where he lived? Yudhir himself didn't particularly want to visit the place he used to live, so he found Gakane's words hard to understand. If he were to take a vacation, he could visit, but only to tidy up the house. In the past, when he became a cavalry commander, he had tidied up his original house and spent his whole life in the barracks. He had no longing for the house where he used to live. There's not much to see there. But it's where you lived. Don't you want to go back and see it, even for a little while? What would Gakane think if he said no here? Either was lost in thought and only noticed the approaching presence behind them later than usual. Go back where? Commander, as Gakane startled and tried to rise from his seat, Kishore raised his hand to stop him. He seemed to have finished his conversation with General Gino and was now alone. Did you have other business besides this mission? No. Gakane seemed rather intimidated by Kishore, their commander. Yudhir saw him looking for help and calmly opened his mouth. My hometown is around here. Your hometown? Interest flickered in Kishore's red eyes. I see. So it's relatively close then. Not exactly. The Ariak Mountains are quite vast. So you are discussing visiting it if it were nearby? Finally, Kishore seemed to piece together the conversation that had been going on between Gakane and Yudhir. Yes. I see, Yudhir. I remember you didn't have a family. Do you miss your hometown?